I healed you like an animal, she said. Lakota Hunter's wild love with the veterinarian Lakota Hunter had always trusted the land more than people. He grew up learning the language of tracks, wind, and wounded animals long before he learned how to speak to strangers. The mountains were his home, and the forest knew his name better than the town ever did. People said he was quiet, distant, maybe even strange, but Lakota didn't mind. Silence never betrayed him. Nature never asked him to explain himself. On a cold morning just before winter settled in, Lakota followed a blood trail deeper into the woods than he normally went. A young elk had been injured by a trap meant for predators, and Lakota had spotted it the night before. He couldn't leave it suffering. He moved carefully, stepping over roots, reading signs on the ground like pages in a book only he could understand. The air was sharp, and the forest felt tense, as if it was holding its breath. He never heard the snap. The trap was old, rusted, and half buried under leaves. When his leg triggered it, the pain came fast and blinding. Lakota fell hard, his breath knocked out of him. The trap didn't close fully, but the damage was enough. Blood soaked into the soil. He tried to pry it open, his hands shaking, his jaw clenched, but his strength faded quickly. The force that had always protected him now stood silent. Hours passed, maybe more. Lakota drifted in and out of awareness, cold, creeping into his bones. His thoughts became scattered, mixed with memories of running barefoot as a boy, of his father teaching him how to follow tracks, of animals he had saved and animals he couldn't. He didn't call for help. He never did. But someone found him anyway. A group of hikers spotted him near the trail edge just before dark. Panic followed. Emergency calls were made. By the time Lakota was carried out of the woods, his skin was pale, his breathing shallow, and his body dangerously cold. The small clinic on the edge of town wasn't meant for serious human injuries. It mostly treated farm animals, wildlife, and the occasional ranch accident. But that night, it was the only place close enough. The veterinarian on duty had been preparing to close when the doors burst open. She didn't panic. She never did. Years of working with injured animals had trained her to move fast without emotion. She took one look at Lakota and started giving instructions, short, clear, firm. Her voice cut through the chaos. She worked with precision, clean hands, steady movements, focused eyes. She didn't ask who he was or what happened beyond what she needed to know. To her, he wasn't a story. He was a body fighting to stay alive. Lakota barely opened his eyes, but when he did, he saw her standing over him, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, face calm but serious. There was no fear in her expression, no pity, just attention. He tried to speak, but no words came out. "That's fine," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "Save your energy." She treated his injuries the same way she treated injured wildlife, stopping the bleeding first, stabilizing what she could, keeping him warm, watching his breathing closely. When others hesitated, she didn't. When someone suggested calling a larger hospital hours away, she shook her head. "He won't make the drive," she said. "We stabilize him here." Hours passed under bright lights and quiet concentration. Lakota slipped into unconsciousness, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. When the danger passed, she stepped back, removed her gloves, and washed her hands slowly. Only then did she let herself breathe. The town knew Lakota Hunter, but they didn't really know him. They knew he lived alone. They knew he helped with injured animals. They knew he avoided gatherings. That was all. To the veterinarian, he was still just a patient. She didn't ask questions. She didn't look him up. She simply checked his vitals every hour and adjusted his care when needed. When Lakota woke up the next day, the pain hit him in waves. His leg was wrapped tightly. His body felt heavy, weak, unfamiliar. He tried to sit up and failed. "Don't!" her voice said from across the room. She stood near a counter reading notes. She looked at him only briefly, then returned to her work. "You lost a lot of blood," she said. "You're not leaving today." Lakota swallowed. His throat was dry. Did the elk? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. She paused. Someone else found it. It'll survive.
That was enough. Lakota closed his eyes again.
Relief softened his face. Over the next few days, the clinic became quiet again. Visitors were rare. Lakota spoke little. The veterinarian spoke only when necessary, but something unusual happened in that silence. They observed each other without judgment. She noticed he never complained, even when pain showed clearly on his face. He noticed she treated him with the same calm respect she gave to injured animals. No unnecessary words, no forced kindness. She didn't talk down to him. She didn't ask him to pretend to be strong. She simply did what needed to be done. When she cleaned his wound, she warned him first. When she adjusted his leg, she watched his breathing carefully. When he flinched, she waited. Patience was something she had learned from animals who couldn't explain their pain. "You heal fast," she said once, almost surprised. Lakota shrugged slightly. "You have to out there." She nodded.
No follow-up questions.
At night, when the clinic was dark, she checked on him quietly. Sometimes he was awake, staring at the ceiling. Sometimes he slept deeply. Once, she found him standing by the window, leaning on his good leg, watching the trees beyond the building. "You shouldn't be up," she said. "I needed to see them," he replied. She didn't argue. She simply stood beside him for a moment, both of them looking out at the forest. No words were needed. In that moment, something shifted. Not attraction. Not love. Recognition. She saw a man who didn't belong to the rules people tried to place on him. He saw a woman who understood care without control. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the beginning of something that would change them both, not because of what was said, but because of how quietly they learned to see each other. And outside, the forest waited. Lakota stayed at the clinic longer than anyone expected. His leg healed slowly, not because his body was weak, but because he had pushed it too far before help reached him. The veterinarian made it clear from the start that rushing recovery would only cause more damage. Lakota didn't argue. He had learned long ago that fighting someone who understood pain was pointless. Days turned into a routine. Morning light came through the small window near his bed. The smell of clean bandages and medicine filled the air. Outside, he could hear birds and distant wind through trees. Inside, everything was calm. Too calm for most people, but for Lakota, it felt almost familiar. The veterinarian checked on him at the same times every day. She never woke him, suddenly. She spoke before touching him. She explained what she was doing in short, clear sentences. Lakota noticed these things. They mattered to him more than comfort words ever could. She noticed things too. She noticed how his eyes followed movement outside the window, how his body tensed at loud noises but relaxed around animals. She noticed how he thanked her without words, with quiet patience and cooperation. He never asked when he could leave. He never complained about pain. He only asked once if his leg would be strong enough to walk the mountains again.
"Yes," she said, "if you listen." He nodded.
That was enough. One afternoon, she brought in a small injured fox in a crate. The animal had been hit by a vehicle near the road. Lakota watched from his bed as she worked. Her hands were steady, gentle, confident. The fox snapped once, frightened and confused, but she didn't pull away. She spoke softly, not in full sentences, just calm sounds. Slowly, the fox relaxed. Lakota had seen that look before. Fear mixed with trust.
"You're good with them," he said. She glanced at him.
"They're honest," she replied. "They don't pretend." That stayed with him. Later, when she helped him practice standing again, he struggled. His legs shook. Sweat formed on his forehead. She didn't rush him. She didn't push. She simply stayed close, ready if he fell.
"Breathe," she said. He did.
Every step felt like learning to walk again. His frustration showed for the first time. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched. She noticed immediately. "Stop," she said. He looked at her, surprised. "You're not failing." she continued. "You're healing." The words were simple, but they landed deeply. No one had ever said that to him before. At night, Lakota dreamed of the forest. Sometimes the dreams were peaceful. Sometimes they were filled with pain and cold and blood in the snow. When he woke suddenly, she was often there, checking his leg or adjusting his blankets. She never asked about the dreams. She didn't need to. They spoke more as days passed, but still not much. Their conversations were short, honest, and spaced with long silences. Lakota told her about tracking animals, about how he could tell fear from injury just by the way they moved. She told him about growing up around farms, about learning early that care meant responsibility, not attachment. "I learned not to get too close," she said once. Lakota understood that more than she knew. When he was strong enough to move around on crutches, she allowed him to step outside the clinic for short periods. The first time, he stood on the porch and closed his eyes. The air filled his lungs. He smiled slightly, without meaning to. She watched him from the doorway. "Don't go far," she said. "I won't," he promised. He kept his word. One evening, rain started suddenly. Heavy drops hit the roof and the ground. Lakota stood under the porch, listening. The sound calmed him. She joined him, standing a few steps away. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. After a long moment, she said quietly, "Most people hate being stuck here." He looked at her. "Most people don't belong out there," he said, nodding toward the forest. She didn't argue. As his strength returned, the idea of leaving became real. The thought made Lakota restless. He didn't want to be a burden. He didn't want to stay where he wasn't needed. But something held him back. Something he didn't fully understand. The veterinarian noticed the change in him. "You're thinking about leaving," she said one morning. "Yes, you're not ready." "I will be." She studied him for a moment. "When you go," she said, "you can't disappear like before." Lakota frowned. "Why?" "Because injuries don't care if you prefer being alone." That made him smile, just a little. On his final day at the clinic, she helped him wrap his leg one last time. Her movements were slower than usual, more careful. He watched her hands, remembering how those same hands had stopped his bleeding, steadied his body, kept him alive. "Thank you," he said. She met his eyes. "Take care of yourself." He hesitated, then said, "If you ever need help with wildlife."
I'm close. She nodded.
"I know." Lakota left on foot, moving slowly but steadily toward the edge of town. He didn't look back. He trusted that she was watching anyway. And she was. As he disappeared into the trees, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not fear, not regret, just awareness. She had healed him like she healed animals, without lies, without softness meant to comfort humans. What she didn't yet realize was that healing someone didn't mean they stopped being part of your life. Sometimes it was only the beginning. Lakota returned to the forest the next morning. The sun was just rising, painting the trees in soft gold. His leg was stronger now, healed enough for him to move carefully across uneven ground. Each step reminded him of how fragile life could be, and how much he had taken for granted. For years, the forest had been his home, his teacher, and his companion. Now it felt different. It seemed quieter, almost waiting for something. He carried a small pack with food, water, and basic supplies. The forest smelled wet from the previous night's rain, and the leaves shimmered under the morning light. He followed familiar trails, noticing tracks in the mud. Deer had passed here recently. A fox had moved along the creek. The rhythm of the forest was unchanged, but Lakota knew he had changed. As he walked, he thought about the veterinarian. Her image stayed in his mind. The calm precision, the quiet patience, the way she didn't try to fix everything, only what needed fixing. He remembered how she treated him like an animal in the best way possible, without judgment, without forcing him to speak, without asking for explanations. He had never met anyone like her before. He wondered if she thought about him now, or if he was just another patient. Another person rescued from the wilderness. He shook his head, trying to push the thought aside. He had always lived alone, and solitude felt safer. Yet a part of him couldn't stop replaying the small moments they shared. The silence on the porch, the way her hands worked with steady care, the way she spoke softly to creatures that could not speak back. Days passed, and Lakota resumed his usual routines. He checked traps for injured animals, helped the occasional lost traveler, and moved through the forest as naturally as he breathed. But something felt different. He found himself pausing more often, noticing details he had never seen before. The curve of a branch, the sound of a hawk overhead, the patterns of footprints in the mud. He realized he had been so focused on surviving that he had never really observed life around him. Now, everything seemed more alive. One evening he noticed an injured raccoon near the creek. Its paw was trapped under a fallen branch. Lakota carefully lifted the branch and examined the paw. It was swollen and the raccoon flinched in fear. He spoke softly, using the same calm tone he had learned from the veterinarian. The raccoon slowly relaxed, allowing him to clean and wrap the paw with strips of cloth from his pack. As he worked, he remembered her instructions, the way she emphasized patience, observation, and respect. He smiled faintly. He was no longer just following instinct. He had learned something more profound. Healing was not only about saving life, but also about understanding it. That night, Lakota sat by his campfire, thinking about the veterinarian. He realized he had developed a deep respect for her, a bond formed not through words or declarations, but through shared experience and quiet understanding. He had been changed by her care in a way he could not yet name. The next morning, as he continued deeper into the forest, he encountered a young woman searching for herbs. She looked lost and anxious. Lakota approached slowly, keeping his distance until she noticed him. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She looked up, relief flooding her face. "Hi. I'm trying to find these plants for my grandmother, but I got turned around," she said. Lakota nodded. "Follow me. I know these trails." As they walked, he guided her carefully, pointing out plants and explaining their uses. He listened intently, clearly grateful for his guidance. For the first time since leaving the clinic, Lakota spoke more freely than he had in months. He realized that helping others had become a natural extension of his time with the veterinarian. He had learned that care did not require closeness, but understanding and patience. By the time they reached the edge of the area she was searching, the sun was high in the sky. She thanked him repeatedly. "You're amazing," she said. Lakota shrugged. "I just know the forest." After she left, he paused and thought about his own journey. He had survived, healed, and returned to the world in a different way. He understood more about himself, his body, and his connection to life around him. And yet he could not shake the image of the veterinarian, her calm eyes, her careful hands, the way she had treated him without forcing him to change. Weeks passed, and Lakota began venturing farther than before. He traveled along trails he had not explored in years, observing wildlife, rescuing injured animals, and documenting tracks and signs. His mind remained alert, but a quiet longing settled in his heart. He realized he missed the companionship of someone who understood him. Not friendship, not love in the usual sense. Something quieter, more essential. One afternoon, he returned to the creek where he had first rescued the raccoon. He found it resting, paw fully healed, watching him with bright eyes. Lakota knelt and offered some food. The raccoon approached cautiously, taking it. He smiled. Caring for others, even animals, reminded him of what the veterinarian had shown him. Healing was as much about patience and respect as it was about skill. A few days later, as he prepared to climb a ridge, he noticed someone moving among the trees below. At first he thought it was another traveler or a lost hiker, but as he approached he saw her, standing quietly, observing the forest, her eyes calm but alert. The veterinarian. For a moment neither spoke. Lakota's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. She looked at him, studying him carefully, noting how strong he had become, how he moved through the forest with confidence. He realized she had come intentionally. "You're stronger than I expected," she said finally. "And you," he replied, came looking. She smiled faintly. "I had to see how you were doing. The forest is different with you in it." Lakota nodded, unsure how to respond. Words were unnecessary. They walked together, quietly observing the surroundings, sharing silence that was more meaningful than conversation. Over the next few days, she stayed nearby, helping him track injured animals and offering guidance when needed. Their routine was not like most relationships. There was no expectation, no pressure, no forced closeness. Just presence, just understanding. One evening, while sitting by the campfire, she spoke quietly. "You've changed," she said.
"Not really," he replied. "Yes," she insisted.
"You've learned to see, to understand, to care differently. You're more patient. You've learned to let things be." Lakota stared into the flames. He realized she was right. He had been healed, not only physically but also in ways that went deeper, ways he could not fully describe. They spent hours in silence, watching the fire and listening to the forest. When she helped him tend to a wounded deer the next morning, she spoke softly, guiding him but letting him lead. He realized that trust had grown between them, not forced, not demanded, but earned through time, patience, and shared experience. For the first time in his life, Lakota understood that healing was not a one-way street. It required care, attention, and respect from both sides. The veterinarian had shown him this, but he had also learned to trust himself, to trust his instincts, and to trust that he could give care as well as receive it. By the end of the week, Lakota felt a new sense of balance. He was stronger, wiser, and more aware of the connections between life, care, and trust. And though he still preferred solitude, he recognized that some bonds, formed through shared struggle and understanding, could not be ignored. As the sun set on the forest, he and the veterinarian stood side by side, watching the last light fade behind the trees. Neither spoke, but both felt the unspoken truth. Some connections go beyond words, beyond expectations, and beyond ordinary understanding. And in that silence, Lakota realized that the Force had taught him many lessons, but the greatest lesson was this: healing could bring two very different lives together, not by force, not by words, but by shared patience, trust, and understanding. Lakota had returned to his routines in the forest, but things were no longer the same. The veterinarian stayed nearby longer than he expected, observing quietly, offering advice when necessary. Her presence was steady, calm, and patient, but it also brought a tension he hadn't felt before. He had grown used to solitude, and now, with someone watching him, guiding him, and quietly correcting him, he felt exposed in a way that was new and unfamiliar. He tried to ignore it, focusing instead on his work, checking traps, tracking injured animals, ensuring the forest's balance remained intact. Yet no matter how far he walked or how many tasks he completed, her presence lingered at the edge of his thoughts. He realized that he both welcomed it and feared it. One morning he discovered a young fawn caught in brambles near the riverbank. Its leg was twisted unnaturally, and it struggled weakly, unable to free itself. Lakota approached slowly, speaking softly, calming the animal with his familiar tone. The veterinarian arrived shortly after, silently kneeling beside him to assist. Her hands were gentle, precise, but firm, guiding him as they worked together to release the fawn. The animal's relief was instantaneous, but for Lakota the experience stirred an unexpected feeling, a sense of connection that went beyond gratitude. He glanced at her as she carefully bandaged the fawn's leg, and their eyes met. In that moment he felt the weight of unspoken emotions between them, a quiet acknowledgement that what had begun as care had now become something far more complicated. The days that followed were filled with shared labor and silence. They moved together through the forest, rescuing injured animals, repairing damaged traps, and observing the rhythms of life around them. Every gesture, every glance, carried a subtle tension. Lakota felt an unfamiliar vulnerability in her presence, while she quietly measured the boundaries of their interaction. Then, the first sign of conflict appeared. Lakota had discovered a small creek blocked by fallen branches, preventing water from reaching part of the forest. He set to work immediately, attempting to clear the blockage. But the task was larger than he expected. The veterinarian arrived offering assistance. "You're overdoing it," she said calmly, kneeling beside him. "You're pushing yourself too hard." "I can handle it," Lakota replied, his voice firm but strained. "You're not thinking clearly," she countered. "This is dangerous." Her tone carried no judgment, only concern. Yet Lakota felt a sting of frustration. He was used to relying on himself, to deciding his own limits, to trusting his instincts. Her caution, though well-meaning, felt like a challenge. "I don't need you to protect me," he said quietly, his eyes focused on the branches he was moving. "I'm not protecting you," she replied, her hands steady on the wood tree side. "I'm helping. There's a difference." The silence that followed was thick. Lakota felt a surge of emotion he hadn't expected. Frustration, confusion, a mix of gratitude and defiance. He realized he wanted her guidance and presence, yet he also wanted to remain untamed, independent, and free. Over the next several days, this tension grew. They worked together side by side, rescuing animals, moving through the forest, and observing life around them. Yet beneath the calm routines, a subtle struggle played out. Lakota resisted the closeness that had developed, even as he relied on it. The veterinarian measured her actions carefully, aware of his need for independence, but also feeling a growing connection she could not ignore. One evening, after a long day of tracking an injured hawk, Lakota sat by the fire, silent, staring into the flames. The veterinarian approached slowly, carrying water and a small bundle of food. She sat beside him without speaking, allowing him to settle into his thoughts. After a long pause, she spoke softly. "You're resisting me." Lakota turned to her, his eyes wary. I don't know what you mean." "You rely on me, but you don't want to admit it," she said. "You want to be free, to survive on your own, but you also want someone who understands." "You're afraid of what that means." Her words struck him. He had never allowed anyone to see his vulnerability, never allowed anyone to notice how deeply he needed understanding and care. Yet here she was, speaking with clarity and insight, noticing the truths he had kept hidden even from himself. "I don't know how to be," he started, then stopped, unable to complete the sentence. "You don't have to," she said gently. "Not yet. Not until you're ready. But you can't hide from it forever." The tension between them grew, but so did their understanding. Lakota realized that love, or something like it, was not about possession or control. It was about recognition, trust, and mutual respect. He also realized that he feared losing himself if he allowed himself to depend on her fully. A few days later, a storm swept through the forest. Heavy rain, strong winds, and fallen trees made travel dangerous. Lakota and the veterinarian worked together to help stranded animals and repair damage, moving carefully through mud and debris. The storm forced them into close proximity, testing both their endurance and patience. During the night, they took shelter under a large overhanging rock. The wind howled, rain splashing into the shallow pool where they rested. Lakota kept his distance, but the veterinarian moved closer, offering warmth and protection. "You don't have to be alone," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the storm. Lakota's heart raced. He had always been alone, always relied only on himself. Her words, simple as they were, carried weight. He wanted to resist, to assert his independence, but he also longed for the connection she offered. "I can handle myself," he replied, though his voice wavered slightly. "I know you can," she said softly. But strength isn't only about doing everything alone. For the first time, Lakota considered the possibility that strength could coexist with trust. That needing someone didn't diminish him. That sharing burdens didn't make him weak. The next morning the storm had passed, leaving the forest wet but calm. The animals they had rescued returned to their routines, the forest alive again with movement and sound. Lakota walked alongside the veterinarian, each step measured, thoughtful, aware of both the forest and the connection between them. Yet the strain of emotions remained. They were not yet fully comfortable with each other, nor fully distant. Their bond had grown, but so had the tension. Lakota realized that for their connection to survive, he would need to confront his fears, not of the forest, not of animals, but of trust and intimacy. Later that day, while examining a wounded owl, Lakota paused. "Why do you stay?" he asked quietly.
You could go back to your clinic. You don't have to be here.
The veterinarian looked up at him, her expression calm. "Because I see you," she said. "Because I know you're not just a patient. And because I can't leave you to do this alone." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth. Lakota understood that healing had brought them together, but it was something more than healing. It was recognition of shared strength, shared understanding, and mutual respect. That night, Lakota lay by the fire, staring at the stars above the forest canopy. He felt the tension of the past days, the resistance, the fear, the longing, and the trust pulling at him in every direction. He realized that he could no longer ignore the bond that had formed between them. He also realized that this bond required courage. Courage not to dominate, not to escape, but to face the truth of connection. As he drifted into sleep, he knew that the days ahead would not be easy. They would test both his independence and his willingness to trust. They would challenge the boundaries he had always relied on to protect himself. But he also understood that this struggle was necessary. That growth, understanding, and perhaps even love could only emerge from facing the tension between freedom and connection. The forest around him was alive, breathing, watching, and waiting. And so was she, steady, patient, aware, and present. Lakota understood that the hardest challenges were not the ones posed by nature, but by the heart. And in that quiet realization, he knew that whatever came next, he would face it not alone, but with someone who truly understood him, someone who had healed him, not only as a body, but as a being. Lakota had grown used to the rhythm of the forest, but now something else had become part of his rhythm. The veterinarian stayed nearby, her presence quiet but unmistakable, a steady companion in the midst of the wilderness. He felt the weight of her gaze sometimes, and at other times, the gentle ease of her trust. It was a strange feeling, part comfort, part tension. But he realized he could no longer ignore it. Days passed with the usual routines, checking traps, rescuing injured animals, tending to the sick. Yet Lakota noticed how differently he moved now. He was stronger, more patient, and more aware, not only of the forest, but also of the bond that had grown between them. He remembered how he had resisted closeness at first, how fear of dependency had shaped his actions. But he also remembered the calm way she had guided him, the way she had healed him without judgment, without forcing him to change. One morning, as the sun rose through the mist, Lakota found a small injured coyote near a rocky slope. Its leg was twisted and it was weak from hunger. He knelt beside it, examining the injury carefully. She appeared silently behind him, observing. "Let's work together," she said softly. Lakota nodded. Together, they cleaned the wound, applied a makeshift splint, and wrapped it securely. The coyote looked at them with wary eyes, then relaxed when she spoke in her calm, steady voice. Lakota realized he had learned from her how to move with patience, to respect boundaries, and to provide care without demanding trust. As the coyote limped away into the forest, Lakota turned to her. "I never thought I'd feel this way," he said quietly. She studied him, a gentle curiosity in her eyes. "What way?" "Connected, not just to the forest, not just to animals, but to someone." Her lips curved into a small, understanding smile. "It's not easy to admit that." "No," he admitted. "It's not." The forest was silent around them, the sounds of birds and wind carrying a calm presence. Lakota felt his chest tighten, a mix of fear, longing, and gratitude. He realized he had been hiding from more than just people. He had been hiding from the possibility of trust, of care, and of love. Over the following days, the tension between them shifted. It was no longer a struggle to balance independence with companionship. Instead, it became a rhythm of shared understanding. They moved together through the forest with an unspoken agreement, observing, rescuing, and caring. Their conversations were still quiet, but they carried weight. Every glance, every gesture, Every shared task strengthened the bond between them. One afternoon, Lakota spotted smoke rising from a distant ridge. He recognized it as a campfire, likely from travelers who had lost their way. He gestured to her. "We need to check it out." Together they climbed towards the smoke. As they reached the site, they found a small family, frightened and cold. Lakota knelt beside them, calming their children, while she assessed their supplies. They offered food and warmth, and guided the family back to a safer trail. Lakota watched her closely, noticing her steady hands and calm voice. He realized that she moved through the world with the same patience and understanding she had shown him, always present, always caring, never demanding. That night back at their camp, Lakota sat silently by the fire. The glow illuminated her face, calm and composed. He wanted to speak, to express the emotions he had carried for so long, but words felt insufficient. Finally, he took a deep breath. "I never wanted to be dependent on anyone," he said quietly. She looked at him, her eyes soft but steady.
"I know, and you don't have to be."
"But I need you," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Her expression softened. "And I need you too," she said simply. For a long time they sat in silence, the fire crackling, the forest around them alive with sound. Lakota realized that their connection was not about control or ownership. It was about recognition, seeing each other clearly, accepting strengths and weaknesses, understanding the limits and possibilities of care. In the following weeks, their bond deepened. They worked together, moving through the forest with quiet coordination, rescuing animals, tracking injured wildlife, and observing the patterns of life. Every task reinforced trust. Every shared moment reinforced connection. Lakota began to speak more freely, sharing memories of his childhood, the lessons he had learned from the forest, and the ways he had survived alone. She listened, offering insight, guidance, and understanding, without judgment. For the first time in his life, Lakota realized that being heard did not mean being controlled. Being cared for did not mean losing independence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest, Lakota and the veterinarian sat side by side near a stream. The water flowed quietly, reflecting the colors of the sky. Lakota spoke softly. "I used to think the forest was all I needed," he said. "That I could live without anyone else. But I was wrong."
She nodded, her gaze on the water. "The forest doesn't replace connection," she said.
"It teaches us, guides us, but we still need each other." He turned to look at her, understanding finally the depth of what she had meant when she healed him. She had not only repaired his body, she had opened his heart to the possibility of trust and care. "I'm ready," he said quietly. "Ready to let someone in. Ready to be part of something that isn't just survival." Her smile was small, but it carried warmth and understanding. "And I am ready too," she said. From that moment their connection became something new, not just patient and careful care, but mutual partnership. They continued their work in the forest, rescuing animals, observing life, and learning from each other. Yet now there was a balance between independence and closeness, trust and freedom. They understood each other in ways that words could never fully capture. Lakota knew that he would always need solitude, that the forest was his home and teacher. But he also understood that he could share life with someone who respected his space, understood his rhythms, and accepted him fully without trying to change him. The veterinarian, in turn, realized that healing was not just about care and skill. It was also about presence, patience, and willingness to accept another person as they truly were. Together they had discovered that love and trust could exist without cages, without demands, without fear. As the weeks passed, their bond strengthened. Lakota became more confident, more open, and more aware of the depth of human connection. The veterinarian moved through the forest with him, guiding, assisting, and sharing moments of quiet understanding. They laughed quietly, shared stories, and celebrated small successes, each rescued animal, each step through challenging terrain, each moment of clarity and trust. One evening, after helping a young deer escape a poacher's trap, they sat silently on a ridge, watching the sun set over the mountains. The forest stretched out below them, alive with movement, sound, and light. Lakota reached out and placed a hand gently over hers. She did not pull away. "I never knew healing could mean this," he said softly. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "It's not just healing," she said. "It's living. Fully, honestly, with trust and care." For the first time, Lakota felt completely at peace. He understood that life in the forest, survival, care, and connection could all coexist. He had been healed in more ways than one, his body, his heart, and his understanding of trust and love. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Lakota realized that some things in life, trust, care, love, could not be rushed or forced. They had to grow naturally, patiently, like the forest itself. And when they did, they became stronger, deeper, and more enduring than anything else in the world. In that quiet, perfect moment, Lakota understood the full truth of their journey. Healing was not just about saving a body, it was about opening oneself to connection, embracing vulnerability, and accepting the presence of someone who truly understood. And in the soft glow of the stars, he and the Veterinarian, side by side, silently vowed to face whatever came next together, strong, free, and connected, just as the forest had taught them.